to another webinar series of the Animal Welfare Group Nigeria. I am Dr. Oluwaseun Sarah. I'm the coordinator of the group, and I'll be the host for today's meeting. I am a senior lecturer at the Department of Animal Physiology, Federal University of Agriculture of Belkuta, and a George Foster Research Fellow at the Humboldt University in Berlin, Germany. The Animal Welfare Group Nigeria, we have three main missions. The first one is to increase awareness about animal behavior and welfare in Nigeria, Africa, and in the world at large. Secondly, we are here to foster collaboration and networking among researchers who are in the field of animal behavior and welfare. And thirdly, is to educate the public on the importance of animal welfare. This group have been organizing series of programs like the webinar, and we also have the virtual inaugural lectures, and we also organized a panel discussion a few months ago. And today we have in our midst Penny Lawlis from the University of Guelph in Canada. She'll be the presenter, and Tumishi Ehibo will be the moderator for today's session. I hope you all find today's meeting interesting, and I want everyone to please make it as engaging as possible by dropping your questions in the chat box. Today's presentation will be on assessing animal welfare in practice, and I think this is a very great opportunity for us to learn the different ways by which we can assess the welfare of animals, the practical measures. Thank you so much once again for joining us. And I hope you find today's meeting valuable and insightful. I would like to hand over to Tumishi, the moderator, to introduce himself and also the presenter of today's webinar. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Tumishi Ehibo, and I'm an MSc candidate at the University of Guelph, Animal Biosciences. And I want to introduce our presenter for today, Penny Lawlis, who is going to be talking about assessing animal welfare in practice. Penny brings over 39 years of experience developing animal welfare policy and delivering animal welfare programs and conducting thousands of audits, inspections of all livestock and poultry species, like goats, sheep, dairy cattle, horses, and poultry. On farm, during transport, at auction, and during slaughter in Canada, the United States, and Europe. She has developed and delivered animal welfare training programs for a wide variety of stakeholders, including veterinarians, producers, animal welfare inspectors and retailers, meat inspectors, and slaughter plant staff, including the development of a decision tree for the transport of compromised dairy cattle, which has been widely adopted by the agriculture industry in Canada. As an adjunct professor at the University of Guelph, Penny has developed and currently teaches a graduate level course in practical assessment of animal welfare, as well as acting as an advisor to graduate students at the master's and PhD levels. Penny holds a Master of Science in Farm Animal Welfare and Behavior from the University of Guelph, as well as a Bachelor of Arts from the University of Western Ontario, and a Veterinary Technician degree from Centralia College of Agricultural Technology. In addition, Penny is a qualified cow signals master trainer, a dairy farm evaluator, a certified Bristol University Animal Welfare Officer, and certified PACO auditor for red meats and poultry. So, Penny, thank you. We are very happy to have you here in Animal Welfare Group Nigeria today. And I know it's quite early, but we are glad to have you, and we are all looking forward to learning from you today. So, Penny, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me all right, everybody?
Yeah.
I can't see anybody or anything, so you have to yell at me if you can't hear me or something's not working right. So yeah, great to be here. Thank you very much for that nice introduction. Just a real pleasure to be involved with this training that you do. I think I really admire all your efforts around animal welfare, and I look forward to meeting Faith in Guelph in sometime in the future. And when it starts to snow here, Faith, I'll bring you a nice warm coat, because you're not gonna like winter very much. I can guarantee that.
Thank you. I look forward to it.
So I just want to talk a little bit about why we're looking at practical animal welfare assessment. So most of the work that I've done has been very practical in the field. Very fortunate. This is a lot of this material is sort of introductory to the course that I teach, and some of the other work that I do, some of the other training that I do. And like during my master's degree with the University of Guelph, I was fortunate. One of my projects was to develop a course, and this is the course that I ended up teaching. This will be my 13th year of teaching that at the University of Guelph. So I feel very fortunate to have had that experience. So one of the things we talk about is, why are we measuring animal welfare? And here in North America and many parts of Europe, when we're looking at measuring animal welfare, it's really in response to consumer concerns about the food that they're eating. So when they do surveys of folks, of consumers and customers around the food that they're eating, and they ask them, so what things are you most concerned about? Folks often, the first thing on their top of mind will be food safety, especially if there's been a food recall or some sort of health scare in the feed. So in the food, so food safety will be number one. Folks are always, that are non-farm folks, consumers, are concerned about the environment. So sort of the impact of food production on the environment is number two. And usually number three, in North America and Europe, sometimes in some of the European countries, animal welfare will be number one. Usually in Canada, in Canada, folks are concerned about animal welfare, but it's not usually top of mind. So when we look at animal welfare, why we're assessing it, why we're looking at practical ways to assess animal welfare, it's really very much, we call it consumer-driven animal welfare around different components of it, regulations and assessments. But still, when we look at consumers, that most folks, when you ask them questions about how they, about using animals for food, most people, and this is some research done out of the University of British Columbia in 2016, that most people, most consumers in North America and Europe, a little bit in South America, and some stuff in China that I just came across this morning, that most people are okay with using animals for food and entertainment, etc., as long as they have assurances. And that's where the idea of coming in and assessing the animal welfare, so we can provide those assurances to the consumer that animals are well treated. And this is a questionnaire that they did at UBC specific to dairy cows. So they want cows to have access to pasture, and they don't want a reliance on antibiotics or hormones in the production of the animals. So consumers are asking for insurances. So that means we have to find practical ways to go on farm and measure what is the life experience of these animals. So there's lots of different research from many different countries. This is some work that's came out of China, that again, asking consumers, what do you think about animal welfare? Do you think about animal welfare? From China, the work that they did in China, the consumer there was more focused on the welfare of wild animals, right? So every area has a different focus when they talk about animal welfare. In China, from this research project, and I do a talk every year to a group of students at a university there. The awareness of animal welfare has increased in China. That's hence the course. But this research also showed that yes, even in China, where they may not have access to a lot of media, they're still becoming more aware of the welfare of animals used for food production. The thing that we also talk about with animal welfare, and the assurance part of it, going on farm, providing assurance that animals have good lives. The other thing that we talk about in conjunction with that is the willingness for consumers to pay for animals that have increased animal welfare, because oftentimes changing from one animal husbandry system to another animal husbandry system is going to create a lot of costs for the producer. So the producer needs to recover that by charging more for their production. So we often talk about that, the willingness to pay. And one of the things when we talk about the willingness to pay is that, so if you're, so there's a phone survey and someone calls you up and says, oh, do you care about animal welfare? As a citizen, you're going to say, yes, I care about animal welfare. But when you go to the store, especially here in North America, currently we have really high inflation. So the cost of a lot of things has gone up exponentially. So when you go to the store, you're as a consumer, you're going to purchase the product that's most cost effective. So that's called the consumer citizen duality. So that's one of the big conundrums when we talk about these animal welfare assessment programs. We talk about, because we talk about implementing different higher standards or different standards. It's really, is the consumer going to pay more for my product, right? So, and when I'm talking about the consumer, it's everyone along the food chain. So it's the person at the store, but it's also the retailer, the restaurant, the processor who's ever purchasing that product from the producer. They're the ones, if they're going to pay more money for these eggs that come from a hen that's in an aviary or a hen that's outside versus a hen that's in a traditional battery cage. So it's all, we have to sort of think about that when we're working in animal welfare. And so just showing you that this is a worldwide thing. So this is some consideration. This is some research from Serbia where they looked at the welfare of poultry. So they said that, the poultry welfare is moderately important to 28% of the egg consumers and very important to 50% of the consumers. But their willingness to pay more for eggs produced according to welfare principles was expressed by only 78% of the consumers. But again, they're asking people, so that's really their citizens here. They're saying 78% of them said, yes, I will pay more for those eggs from hens that are, free run or in aviaries. But what happens at the store, at the consumer level? And you can also find lots of research to sort of back that up, as well as that, farmers produce this higher welfare products, but they're just not selling at the store and they end up losing money and going out of business. So this is just something that I looked at this morning. So this kind of sums up my whole talk here about, the consumer interest. So there's growing public concern about the welfare of farm animals, right? Farm animal welfare can be considered an ethical attribute of product quality. So this paper, and I can send that around if you want later. This paper elicits consumers' willingness to pay for animal welfare. So we call that WTP, for animal welfare attributes in pork products using a choice experiment in China. So, and then they found, and I haven't read the paper, but it was interesting that they found that consumers, again, and I haven't read the paper, so I'm not really sure if they're actually going to the store and asking people while they're buying it, or they're just asking people on the phone, because then they would be more responding as citizens. Consumers are willing to pay a premium of 13 yen or 18 yen for a more desirable product that has some attributes, animal welfare attributes, branding, humane slaughter, and environmental friendliness. So interesting that this is something that's happening in many parts of the world. So the other reason that we want to measure animal welfare, and hopefully you guys have heard of Temple Grandin, and this is her and other folks have looked at this. There's people at the University of Guelph that we also study this as well, that you want to measure animal welfare because poor welfare can result in poor quality. So, just pre-slaughter handling is one of the areas that I worked on for many years, because that that time immediately before slaughter can really affect the outcome of the product. So, you know, it doesn't make any sense to have an animal, raise it for its whole life, and then have that meat quality, have that meat ruined by poor animal handling at the slaughter plant. So this is just some more, these are actually Temple slides looking at just, you know, ruining a carcass because of prodding, using electric prods and having a poorly designed facility. So you have really poor handling and really poor outcomes, animal welfare outcomes, as well as meat quality outcomes at the plant. One of the other reasons why I don't know how to dissolve this screen thing there at the top. One of the other reasons, and we talked about this briefly, there we go, that's better. Why we're looking at practical animal welfare standards or assessing animal welfare is because of, you know, regulations, standards. So many restaurant companies, retailers, processors have their own standards. So we need to assess those. We need to assess whether or not those standards are being met on farm. And a lot of the third-party audits that I perform are based on retailer third-party standards that have been developed by the industry, et cetera. When I worked for the government, of course, when I was doing animal welfare assessments, I was looking to make sure that people were following what was in the legislation. So when we look at carrying out animal welfare assessments for standards of care, really comes into play when we're looking at trade as well. So companies or countries want to be in trade agreements with other countries that have similar animal welfare standards. So I don't know, you guys might have heard of Brexit, but that's a big conversation that they're having there because, you know, the British folks don't want to have animal welfare products coming in that don't meet their high standards. Okay, what's going on? So there's lots of different goals looking at why we're assessing animal welfare, right? So certification, which I've already mentioned. There's some programs that just evaluate new housing systems, looking at diagnosing you have a problem. I know here I worked on a project where someone had excessive stray voltage issue on their dairy farm. So we went out and looked at the animals to try to figure out where the stray voltage was coming from so we could sort of deal with that. Really, you know, the next slide sort of talks about that as well. So for a lot of programs for animal welfare assessments, sort of like here in North America, and I know in Australia, a lot of in Europe as well, when they introduce a program of animal welfare assessment, they often do that just to kind of do benchmarking, as well as, and then allowing the producer to benchmark their system where they're at so that they can institute some improvements and see how those improvements can change things on the farm. So, you know, that's really, you know, advice, producer education, animal welfare assessment programs are very important. And I would say that, you know, I've seen that so many times in the last 39 years where you go and, you know, I think it's the next slide where you know, Temple Grandin talks about you manage what you measure. So you go on a farm, you look at hawk lesions, you look at lameness, you look at feather scores in poultry, and then the farmer, you know, puts in pecking stones or something to make some improvement. And then you can measure, well, I put in 10 pecking stones, my feather scores improved 5%. You know, I put in 20 peck stones, my feather scores increased 10%. So it's real. I've seen that so many times, but until you measure it and you can kind of see that change, it's not very meaningful. So yeah, so this is like Temple Grandin. I'm sure you've heard of her. I've worked a lot with her over the years. She's fantastic, but really her, you know, she's talked about this for 50 years. She'll say, you know, you manage what you measure. So if you can measure something, so that's really where the animal welfare assessment comes in as that learning piece, then you can manage it better, right? So if you know, as I said, if you know that you have lots of lameness, high percentage of lameness in your herd of dairy cows, you can do better hoof care, you can provide foot baths, etc. You can change the flooring, and then you can measure it again and say, yes, I've made an improvement, or no, I haven't made improvement. So really benchmarking is really critical. So, benchmarking can, a lot of the programs that we started here in Canada, we would do, I did the first project I did was like 75 farms, and then we could kind of rank all the farms, and you were number 1, you were number 50, and the farmer that was number 50 is like, well, how do I get to be number 1? So it, sort of this peer pressure, because all the farmers want to be number 1. So, it's really, benchmarking is really a very cool tool that you can, when you do animal welfare assessment, just to kind of get people motivated to, to be higher up the ranking. But as well, you can, when you go on the farm and you do several different measures, you can, so yes, you don't have you don't have good lameness scores, but all your cows are clean and all your cows have really good body conditions. So you can sort of see you're really doing a good job with the feed and the cleanliness, but your lameness, your hoof care, or whatever your flooring or is an issue. So it can really point out strengths and weaknesses. Okay. So yeah, it's really, I already talked about this. So it really encourages farmers to motivate them to try new things. So again, when we're looking again, why we're doing animal welfare assessments. So, for certification for these schemes that provide that assurance to the consumer. So we have to go on farm. Originally, a lot of these programs were probably not, mostly just sort of paperwork programs, but then in the last 15 or so years, all these programs include going on the farm and looking at animals, and I'll talk about that a little bit more. So this is like the RSPCA, the Freedom Foods. This is like the oldest scheme that's been around for a long time. It's very well respected. But really, when we look at animal welfare assessment schemes, so here in North America and parts of Europe and Australia, and more so just sort of becoming popular in South America, is that almost every type of farming has an animal welfare assurance program that they have to get either audited, either second party or third party audited, to verify that yes, I am complying with the standards. So there are some programs around like wool, like sheep. So I used to do the responsible wool standard by the Textile Exchange, where it's just an animal welfare audit that's done just to verify that the sheep used for wool production have a good quality of life. I do assessments for mink farms, also just for down production from geese or from ducks. So almost every farm would have at least one program that they have to get certified for or verified. But many farmers have more than one program. So because they have more than one customer that buys their products, so they will be inspected or audited by more than one auditor every year. In Europe, the auditor, the farmers would get inspected if they had it in a scheme for their customer, but they would also be inspected by the government as well, because they have different sort of legislation than they do here in North America. So yeah, so as I said, the slide isn't, whoops. My animations weren't working for some reason, but there's so many programs around the world, so many different programs around animal welfare assurance. And as I said, many farmers today have to do more than one audit. So sometimes when I go out to farm, I will be doing 2 or 3 different programs while I'm there at the same time. So farmers like that. They like to have one person come and do all their different audits versus having three different auditors come out at 3 different times. But that's sort of the way things go here, that they get audited more than once with different programs, and the different programs will have different standards. A lot of the programs they have similar standards, but some require more specific things. So yeah, it's sometimes farmers are pretty sick of being audited. So what are these? So we do that. So we have all these programs, sort of hopefully explain sort of the need for the programs based on customer or consumer assurance, whoever the consumer is for whatever reason. So how are these programs, how are they made up? So when we look at how we assess animal welfare in these programs, there's 3 different measures. So I'm going to refer to them as resource-based measures, management-based measures, and animal-based measures. So there's 3 different approaches, 3 different measures that we can use. And so I'm going to go through those measures. If you have any questions about those, you can, I can't really see the chat as you can see my screen, but, feel free to, I want to make sure that you understand these. So we look at resource-based measures. So these are measures, things that you go on a farm or in a plant or in a dog kennel or whatever, and you measure them. So these are what we call resource-based, or RBMs for short. So these are the prescriptions for or features for the environment, right? So these are like, fan speed, space allowance, etc. And usually these prescriptions or these resources, Tina likes to call them the way the furniture is arranged in the facility. These in Canada and in other jurisdictions as well, these are determined through research, right? So we know that a hen likes this much 72 square inches per hen, that sort of thing. So these are called resource-based measures. So that means I would have a standard that said, that hens have to have one nipple for 10 hens. They need 1 square foot. They need, the light has to be 10 lux. So I can go on a farm and I can measure those things, right? So these are called resources. So yeah, so these are some more examples: space allowance, numbers of feeders and drinkers, the temperature that they should be housed at. So these are all resources. These are all the things that are provided to the animals that we know that result in good animal welfare. So a lot of the programs initially were basically going on the farm and looking for the resources. So looking for those, what's the space allowance, etc. So resource-based measures the advantage of those is that they are stable over time. So if you go to a barn and it has 1,000 square feet, and you go next month, it's going to be 1,000 square feet. So as an auditor, as an assessment of animal welfare, it makes it easy, right? Because it's always the same number. The other good thing about resource-based measures for a lot of them, like feeder space, space allowance, water and drinkers, because a lot of times when you don't have enough resources for animals, it'll lead to competition. So competition, you can see things like feather pecking or fighting. So if you go to a farm and you look at some of the resources that are provided and they're not adequate, then you can sort of figure out, well, maybe that's my problem, and you can use that for problem solving. So those are resource-based measures. So they are stable over time. The other thing is that if we were all together somewhere, we could go to a farm. I could give you a standard that just included resource-based measures, things that you could measure like length times width, etc. We could go on the farm and I'm confident that we could perform that assessment. But the big disadvantage of resource-based measures is that they really don't assess welfare. So because it's all the furniture and all the things that are provided to an animal, you could basically go to a farm and do your assessment and never look at an animal, because you're not really taking into consideration what the animals look like. You're not taking into consideration, they don't account for the level of care, so how good the stock person is. So those are resource-based measures. So a lot of the early programs were just looking at the resources. So the second measure is management-based measures. So these are all the protocols, right? So if you guys have done any work in HACCP or any of the food safety areas, these programs for HACCP in a plant are all management-based measures. So they're all just looking at documents, right? So when we're talking about animal welfare, we're looking at protocols and records for things like, when do you castrate your pigs? How old are they? Are you using pain control? What's your method for euthanasia? Do you have records of training for your stock people? So these are the management-based measures. So again, the advantage of management-based measures is they're easy to assess. Again, I could give you I'm confident that I could give you a checklist and we could go to the farm and we're going to check to make sure that they have all these protocols. We could do that assessment very easily. Again, they're stable over time. They have a lot of the same advantages as the resource-based measures. But the big disadvantage again is that it's not a direct measure of welfare. So that leads me to the third type of measure, which is the animal-based measure. And really, as I said, a lot of these on-farm animal welfare assessment programs initially, like say 15 or 20 years ago, they really consisted mostly of management-based measures. So looking at documents, and resource-based measures, looking at the environment. But once the consumer got more involved in these programs, a lot of consumers don't understand things like square footage and feeding points and that sort of thing. And they really felt that they wanted someone to go and look at the animals and then give them information back about what's going on with the animals. What are they like? So that leads us to the animal-based measures, which are different systems that are designed and set up to actually go to the farm, look at the animals, and kind of get some information about their how their biological functioning. So a lot of these methods, animal-based measures, looking at things like mortality records, but again, these are really records. But really what we're looking at is things like injuries, right? So I'll talk about later if I don't run out of time, because I know I maybe misjudged my session, but mostly when we're going on farm and looking at these animal-based measures, we're not really looking, we're just sort of starting to design measures that look at positive welfare, like use of brushes and etc. But mostly when we go and do these assessments, we're hoping to see, or we'd like to see we're looking for the absence of injury or skin lesions, or we want good locomotion scoring. So really that's what we're looking for, signs of pain and other things like body condition and cleanliness. There are some more complicated animal-based measures like this novel object test, which is my favorite test to do, but it takes a lot of time, and human animal response tests and other things. And as I said, one of the things that when we're looking at animal welfare assessment in general as a science, we're looking at exploring ways that we can go on the farm and look at positive welfare. So the only sort of example I have of that currently is just looking at, is there a brush for cows, like a rolling brush? I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, but a rolling brush, because they really like that. How many cows are using that in an hour? That's the sort of thing that we're starting to look at now. And it's a big field, and it's very exciting trying to go and say, yes, I've seen these signs of positive play behavior when I go on farm. So again, animal-based measures, the big advantage, of course, is that you're getting the information exact from the animals, right? The other thing about animal-based measures is that it sort of takes out the farm, right? And takes out all the, if you can have not such a great building, or it's an older building, but if the farmer's a really good farmer and he's there very attentive with the animals, his animals are going to look great. So it's a direct measure of animal welfare. So the thing about animal-based measures, and I'm just going to spend the last few minutes talking about that, is that they are really great for assessment, but they're very difficult to perform. You have to spend a lot of time training people on them. But I mean, it's not impossible. It takes a lot of time. The thing about animal-based measures as well is that, so if I train you today, and I'm going to train you a little bit on it, we'd have to recalibrate in 6 months, because people tend to learn how to do animal-based measures, and then they either over time they sort of shift to being tougher with their assessment, or they become less tough. So we have to recalibrate it. So that's what I mean. It's time consuming. We have to do the initial training, and we have to recalibrate it. The other thing about animal-based measures, which is really frustrating for the farmers, is that if I went to your farm and I found like 20% of your cows were lame, it doesn't tell me why they're lame, right? So then we have to go back and we have to look at the resources, and we have to look at, stocking density and those sorts of things, to kind of in the flooring and the hoof trimming that they're doing. We have to look at those things to figure out why you have lameness. So that's, farmers find that's kind of frustrating. So these are just some examples of some of the animal-based measures systems that are out there. So this is very brief. These are taken from a big program that was developed in Europe called the Welfare Quality. So again, here, these are cows' knees. So you would go onto the farm and look at swelling on the knees. So the one on my left, I guess it's your left too. You can see that it has nice knees. They're nice and smooth, but the one on the right, they're swollen. So that one would score a 2, and this one would score a 0. Things like nasal discharge. So you're looking for the presence or absence of these things. And then ocular discharge, again, this Holstein up here would score a 0. This one would score a 2. This one would score a 1. So these are how these systems work. And so these are animal-based measures. Again, absence or presence of diarrhea, pretty straightforward. So yeah, so those are some of the, again, you can see that we're looking for the presence or absence of some sort of negative trait. Moving, going along with different kinds of measures. One of the projects that I worked on was looking at a grimace scale to look for pain behavior. So this is, I worked on the grimace scale for piglets. This is a grimace scale that quantifies the changes in RAS. So that, and we use this, we don't use this practically, although they're trying to develop the one for piglets to use in a farm setting. These ones have been, the grimace scale have been more developed for research. So looking at what's, providing pain medication to kind of verify whether or not the pain medication is appropriate. So this is one of the projects that I worked on with Pat Turner and Abigail Viscardi, looking at piglet grimace scale that can be used on farm for pork producers. So that's a bit more fancy or higher tech. So I just wanted to talk about body condition scoring and looking at a system, how it sort of works. So this is a score that's commonly used for body condition score of dairy cows. So and this is sort of to illustrate, or this is to illustrate the point that body condition scoring, it's a bit more complicated than, I could, like I said earlier, I could give you a animal welfare assessment program that says, okay, every cow needs 100 square feet, and we could go out and measure it. So that's pretty easy. So now we want to go on a farm and we want to measure body condition score. And we measure body condition score because it tells us all those things. It tells us, is there enough feeding space? Is the feed, is the feed nutritionally balanced? That kind of thing. Are they giving enough feed? So it tells us a lot of information. It's a very useful animal-based measure. Plus we're looking at the cows. So here, don't try to read the whole thing, but here, we look at score 1 is going to be thin, emaciated, right? Extremely emaciated. And score 5 is an animal has got too much flesh on it. It's too fat. So, because that's really when we're looking at body condition scoring of a dairy cow or any sort of animal, that's really what we're doing. Body condition is like how much fat cover is on that animal. So by looking at the fat cover on these different areas of the body of an animal, we can say that it has good fat cover, has good body condition, or has poor body condition. So poor body condition, emaciation, is number 1 in this scale, and number 5 is overcondition. So if we look at this cow here, and we can maybe put this in the chat, from that scale of 1 to 5, what number would you give this, you guys? I want you to pop that in the chat. Two. Pretty close. Yeah, 1. I would give her a 1. Okay, so this isn't a test or anything. So I just want to sort of illustrate to you the animal-based measures. So that cow is a 1, right? So she's emaciated. She can see that she's got no fat, right? You can see all of her, right? All of her it's like a skeleton with a blanket on it. So she's 1. So pretty good. You guys are getting really good at this. So then we'll look at the next animal. So what do you want to score this one? Again, that's not a test. Come on, don't be shy. Good. Yeah, so she would be a 3. What about this cow? Anybody? Yeah, so she looks a little bit different than this one. So she would be a 4 or 5. Good. Anyway, so it kind of illustrates that, it's not that hard to do, but it's all these different numbers. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about a program that I'm working at with another researcher at the University of Guelph. So we've developed this system, which we call a stoplight system, so we don't have numbers, right? So it's sort of like green it looks good, right? No body condition issues. Yellow, it's not good, but it's not horrible, which would be emaciated, which would be red. So because I find from doing this for so many years that people get so hung up on the numbers, because somebody there, Elijah, you put in a 3.5, and I didn't give you the 3.5 option. So you've obviously done this before. So that's sort of what happens. So we've done so much training, especially with first responders. So that's like animal welfare inspectors. I don't want to talk about numbers anymore. It's like, is she too thin? Does she need follow-up, or does she need a vet right away or whatever? So that's why we've developed this green, yellow, and red. So if we look at this cow now, is she green, yellow, or red? Right? Does she need help? Is she too thin? Is she emaciated? Yes. There, you got it. So anyway, that was just to kind of illustrate, when you're doing your animal-based measures, you need to use simple systems that people don't get. So this one here, so what does this one look like, this cow here? Anyway, she looks green. Yeah, so that was a lot easier than the 1s and the 2s, and then somebody used the 3.5 or whatever. That was just to illustrate that point. So when we look at, so those are the 3 different assessments. The resource base, remember, that's the furniture. The animal base is looking at the animals, and the management base is looking at the protocols and their training records, etc. Most animal welfare, so as I said early on in the evolution of animal welfare assessment programs, a lot of the programs focus just on records or just on the resources, but currently, programs include all different assessments. So they have I like a program that has a nice balance using some resources. So some nipples per hen, that kind of thing. And then also some records, some training records. Especially, we like to have protocols for things that you're not going to regularly see on a farm, like euthanasia, or if I'm doing a dairy audit, I'm probably not going to see calving, right, unless I'm at a bigger farm. So I need to know what their protocol is, because I'm not going to see it while I'm there. And then some animal-based measures as well, that have simple systems. Anyway, I think I'm going to stop there, and just because I see there's some questions. Is that okay? So I can answer some of these questions in the chat.
Yeah.
So yeah, someone wants to know, is like, so biological. So biological, so you're talking with biological and behavior and subject. So those are different approaches to understanding animal welfare. So the measures are, we don't really, I know it's 3 things, and it's, I didn't put them in circles on purpose because I know it's confusing, but like, I do understand biological functioning. Yes, that the thing is that, and I'm not sure who asked that question. So the thing is that you can give me a standard, and I can measure it either. I can either measure it using a resource-based measure. For example, I can give you here's an example. So you can give me a standard that says, the temperature must be, animals must have a appropriate body temperature in their housing facility. So I can measure that by animal-based measure by going and looking at the animals and seeing if they're shivering or if they're panting, right? That's the animal-based measure. I can measure it by a resource-based measure by going and looking at the thermostat on the wall or measuring it with the thermostat. So that's the resource-based measure. The management-based way I would measure that would be from looking at your protocol that you have, you open the fans up, you open the windows up in the summertime and let the air go through, and in the wintertime you close it up. So that would be the management-based measure. So I can remeasure, behavior, subjective feelings, or biological functioning. I can measure whatever standard you want using any measure. Does that make sense for that question?
Yeah, Penny, I can read out the question for you to make it quite easier.
Yeah, I can see it here. And the other question is about whether, okay, does it translate to higher price of the product? So again, it's driven by the consumer, right? So that's that willingness to pay. So if I have product that I'm going to produce and give the animals a higher quality of life, is someone willing to pay for that extra, right? So it's really up to your customer or your consumer. So here when I go to the store and I buy eggs in the store, there's eggs from different systems. They're all different prices, right? And people buy different eggs. I mean, I buy, I know what kind of eggs I buy. So that's sort of the higher price things if folks are willing to pay for it. But it doesn't automatically, no. It doesn't automatically. Good question, though.
There's one up top about, it says, do you think that the inherent cost of improving welfare of farm, which naturally are reflected in the prices of goods? Okay, I think you answered that just now. Yeah.
I don't know, like they were asking about plant-based alternatives. I think they're just as expensive as everything else. So I'm not really sure that, and for some people anyway, those things are more of a moral, right? They don't want to eat food that's produced from animals. So I don't know, when you look at, sustainability and, water usage. And so some of these, like lately in the news here, some of these plant-based alternatives are not doing very well because they cost their inputs, like especially water, so a lot of places in North America, water isn't readily accessible and it's expensive to use a lot of water in production, like even for dairy farming, right? So I think that's limiting those alternatives in some areas of the world as well. So
yeah.
Good question though.
Thank you for your answer to that question. Dr. Matthew Weto is asking that I have a similar question here too, so I'll just combine it. That out of the three measures, which are resource-based, management-based, and animal-based, which one will you recommend, or does it depend on the species, target population, or the essence of production? Also, I would like to combine it with my question because it's quite similar. Because I read somewhere that animal-based measures are generally considered to outweigh the resource-based measures and management-based measures. So why is it like that? I think combined. Yeah.
Well, what kind of measure you're going to use depends on what you're doing, right? Sort of the goal of your program or your project or whatever. So you want to measure something that's going to give you the information that you can use in your project or your program, right? So if you're a retailer and you're designing a program and it's really important that all the dairy cows have a good place to lie down, then I would suggest that you would go and look at remember the knees, the swollen knees that we saw? So you would go and you would look at that. You'd look at hocks and knees, because that's where the dairy cow interacts with her lying surface, right? So that's how I design programs. So I sit down with folks or projects and go, what are you trying to measure? Or what are you trying to, if you're trying to measure something to improve it, you have to measure it first. So what are you going to improve? And what are you going to look at? That was sort of decide how you're going to measure it. So, and then, if you have lots of money and lots of time, and you can go on a farm and you can stand around for 5 days and watch a calf being born, watch them euthanize a calf. That's going to be different than, okay, I've got 3 hours. I want to go on the farm and I want to look at all these different aspects of the farm. Then you're going to have, like I said, combination, a nice complementary combination of animal-based, resource-based, and management-based measures, that they all sort of complement each other. That's to my mind, and that's a good program. So some programs I go and I spend 2 hours looking at their records and their protocols and about 5 minutes looking at their animals. It's not a good program. It's not a balanced program, right? So animal-based measures would only be, if you went to a farm and they had enough feeder space and they had enough feed on the farm, but the cows were still skinny, that's when you would go, we need to do something because I'm going to use the animal-based measure, right? Does that make sense? But so there's really not, the thing about animal-based measures, they are fun and everything, but they're tricky and they take a lot of time, and like especially for scoring like body condition score and lameness, there's a subjective element in that, because you're taking information from 10 different points and trying to analyze it. And you can see from that little silly thing I did, right? Some were 3.5, like, that's the problem with them. They're nice and everything, but it takes a lot of work, and you have to, the one program that I work on, every 6 months, we have to get everybody on Zoom and we have to test them again. So it takes a lot of work and a lot of money. And it's like, if you got lots of money and lots of time, then go for it.
All right. Thank you very much for that response. I think we now have a better understanding. Fami Idris is asking, the question is quite long, so I will just take it carefully. He said, what should we do when we see traditional culture, which is massively disencouraging animal welfare? Like, I think he said it happens in the Tohon market in Indonesia, where meat of regular livestock and irregular animals to be consumed, like pythons, lizard, bats, rats, dogs, or even cats. Cats are sold to the customers here. He said the government and the environment activities are trying to stop them, but it still continues. So what do you think about that? And he also said that some researchers think that this traditional culture can manage and conserve the nature. So what do you think about that? What's your thought about it?
I just think that, like what you guys are doing now, like education, awareness, right? It's like, the more you educate and to talk to different people within the community about, maybe this isn't such a great idea. That's, it's sort of tough to go and tell people, like if somebody came and told me that I was doing something wrong, of course, I'm going to be really defensive about it. Right. So, that's sort of just human nature, but really sort of awareness and, like just like the sentience of animals, etc. I think that, that's really that's all we can really, that's the best way to do it. So it's more time consuming, it takes longer, but it's like, that's what I've seen for the last 39 years, like the use of pain control for, everything in farming, like castration and everything. Like I now thought we would never get there, but now we use pain control all the time, because through education and that it benefits the animal, because most people that have animals want them to have a good quality of life, but they maybe don't quite understand or are up on what that actually means, right? So I do lots of stuff with dogs too, and dogs here are, people put them in purses and stuff. It's like, like your dog doesn't really want to do that, so it's like just talking to people and saying, from the dog's point of view. So I just think that that's the way to approach it, through education and like, the access to good information and discussion.
Okay, thank you very much for the answer. Dr. Samuel Droshara is asking that, I think you said something similar, but out of the animal-based measures of welfare, which one gives the best results? Is it health, physical condition, or behavior?
What question was that? Oh, I see.
Yeah, out of the animal-based measures of welfare, which one gives the best results? Is it health, physical condition, or the behavior of the animal itself?
Well, it depends again what you're trying to measure, right? So for behavior tests, you're usually measuring human animal response, right? So you're trying to get a feel for, how well are these animals handled on a day-to-day basis. So you can't really compare them. It's sort of what you're, again, what are you looking to measure? What aspect of animal husbandry, housing, etc. are you trying to measure? Then you want to pick that measure that will give you that information. So, I mean, that's the thing that I always talk about with cleanliness. So in a lot of programs, they score cleanliness, but it's like, what are we even measuring when we're doing cleanliness, right? So I don't think animals are like, hey, I'm dirty and they're unhappy. It's more, we're measuring their husbandry. We're measuring how well they're keeping their barn or their dry lot or something like that. So you need to pick a measure that's going to give you the information that you need.
Okay. Yeah, thank you very much. I also have a question here. It's not in the chat box, but I was following when you spoke about benchmarking. So I would like to know how you provide the result of benchmarking to farmers. And when you do benchmarking, do you compare similar farms, like in an area, like you compare a pig farm versus a pig farm, or you compare all kinds of farm, maybe a poultry versus a pig versus all kinds of farm? Yeah.
No, you would certainly. So what we do was do various different things. Like sometimes the benchmarking is through like just a research project. So you publish a paper. Usually, like, we go to, like, I've done dairy projects and pig projects. We go to meetings and talk to producers. I know for the dairy project, we developed a peer report. So everybody got a report and sort of said, like I said, well, you're number 50 out of 75 or something like that. So, and a lot of times we work with their veterinarians because they're sort of interested in knowing what they're doing. Sometimes it's, I can remember early on with the work out of Ontario Vet College, with using pain control for disbudding of calves, they did a survey and said, how many farmers were using it? And it was like, none, kind of thing. So, so they use that, hey, we got a really low benchmark. And then they did training and talked to the farmers about they had demonstrations on how to use pain control. And then they did a survey later on and they could say, hey, we went from like 5% to 25% or whatever. So there's lots of different ways of doing that. So, but farmers are like, usually pretty interested in what other farmers are doing. Right. So I know when I do stuff here with pigs, they're always pretty interested in what's going on in Germany, because I think maybe that's their big competition. So yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Penny, for this insightful presentation. Actually, I knew about animal-based and resource-based measures of animal welfare before today, and you've made me realize that there is the management-based measures. Thank you so much.
Oh, yeah.
That's
Okay.
a good take home for me. And also that these measures, of course, are mostly consumer-driven. But I want to ask just a quick question. I noticed you talked about the Grimmie scale for measuring the pain. Is it pain?
Yeah.
In animals. And I have a colleague that have been wondering over this. He's also part of this meeting, and he has been asking this question. I don't know if you'll be the best person to answer. If there is a way pain or negative states can be assessed in poultry using facial expression.
No, I don't think so. I mean, the biggest one for poultry, of course, is tonic immobility, right?
Yeah.
Right. So I've not seen any work. You know, I could look into it, but I mean, because with the pigs, and like they do with horses too. So it's like, because their orbit changes, like their eyes actually change shape. You can see it if you start looking for it. And then you also get, like, you know, funny mouths on the piglets. And the same with horses too. They do this with horses, and horses you can actually do blinking too. So with poultry, they, you know, I don't know. We could look for orbital tightening, but mostly with poultry, anything like any sort of test like that is tonic immobility, right? So, which most people call, oh, they're sleeping, but no, they're like, right? They're frozen in fear. So, but yeah, I'm not aware of anything like that. That's interesting. I've never thought of it. So, I mean, I can look into it, but I'm not aware of anything like that. It's mostly pigs, horses, like all the rats, and the guys from university in England, is it Matthew Leach? He teaches a really fantastic course on Grimace scale scoring for rats, mice, and rabbits. So you can do that virtually. It's a fantastic training that they do.
Matthew Leach
at the I've never heard that for poultry.
Oh.
What's that?
Is it Matthew Leach at the Newcastle?
Yeah, Matthew Leach. Yeah. It's a great course.
Thank you so much. Once again, I also want to use this opportunity to appreciate all the participants. You're free to turn on.
Thank you.
You're free to turn on your video, and if you have further comments for our presenter, this is an opportunity to interact with her. You just have maybe 2-3 seconds if you have any comments. And then I have this this announcement. The next webinar will be on the 19th of October, and the presenter is Dr. Oyebanji Fumilola Felicia. She's part of us today. She'll be talking about animal welfare, human health, and the environment. So that's on the
One welfare.
Yes, one welfare.
Yes.
Thank you. And also I dropped in the chat box that the first regional meeting of the International Society for Applied Ethology for the Africa and West Asia region will be coming up December 1st and 2nd. And I want to encourage every one of us. The meeting is not only for Africa, or if you're in Africa or West Asia, please, it's for everybody. If you have your students, we encourage students to, to send in their abstracts. It's not really a high-tech conference thing like that. It's a meeting where we discuss ideas. So if you have students that have their abstract, they can, present. It's an opportunity for them to let us know what they are doing, and we can see how to provide feedback, and this would help them, progress and do better in their research work. It's just a means of encouraging them, welcoming them to animal welfare, and also we'll be having a networking event during that meeting where we will invite other ISAE members from different regions. So that is an opportunity for you to connect with other people doing things that are similar or what you're interested in doing. So I want to appreciate everybody from different parts of the world. I'm so excited to have you join our meeting. I'm seeing the names of people that are actually joining us for the first time. Thank you for joining the Animal Welfare Group Nigeria. Please, you kindly follow us on LinkedIn, Animal Welfare Group Nigeria. On Facebook, we're there, Animal Welfare Group Nigeria. And on Twitter, we are AWGN14. And also, if you have missed any of our previous webinars, feel free to check our YouTube channel, the Animal Welfare Group Nigeria. I'm so excited because I think I was the one supposed to present today, but there was this, swap in in the person to present. I'm so excited. And is there anybody that have any comments or any question before we wrap up today's meeting? Please indicate by raising your hand if you have any question or any comment for the presenter. Okay, Dr. Wetu. Dr. Wetu, you're welcome. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, the host, Dr. Yastere. Okay, I just want to appreciate the presenter of today's webinar for that insightful presentation. At least I've learned a lot, and the question I asked was wonderfully answered. So I want to say a big thank you for that presentation.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for being here.
For a wonderful job.
Thank you. Thank you very much for being here.
Is there any further comments before we wrap up the meeting? Yep. So I want to appreciate everybody once again and thank you for staying through the program. And I wish you've learned something today and you have something to take back with you. And please, you can follow us so that you will get information of our next meeting and programs that we have. We'll still be having one of the virtual lectures in November. That'll be a great one. So just check our Facebook and LinkedIn, then you'll get an update of whatever meetings that will be coming up next. And with that, I want to say thank you, Penny, once again. Thank you for what you are doing. And I hope to see you very soon. Thank you. And
yes, I'm looking forward to that. Thank you. Yes. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Have a great day. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. So with that, we come to the end of today's meeting, and I appreciate you all for attending. Thank you so much. Adekunle Shorunke, Kolaole Juwon, Sadiq Baba Sulaiman, Fami Idris, Tumishi Abdul Rahman Safia from Ghana, Elijah Odoemene, Gideon, thank you. Oladele Raimot, you're welcome. Victor Yeniron, happy birthday to you. Hayesha Olajumeke Abdul Aziz Taufik. Mansour Zubairo, Shuzan Lau, thank you. Novelota Pisa from Brazil. Son, Samuel Durosharo, thank you so much for joining. Fumilola Oyebanje, Oluto Christina, Eletu Temitayo. In fact, you guys really made my day today, seeing you, attending. Mr. Babs, Oluwaseun, Pajela de Emmanuel Oke, thank you so much for joining. Wetu. Thank you so much, Aisha. I need to stop this.